Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are talking about maceration. So maceration is essentially the process of which oils blend together to make a unique and beautiful perfume. So I think there's a lot of stigmatism around maceration and what it actually entails. And so this video is designed to tell you step by step what maceration is and how we can use it to produce a very beautiful perfume. Okay, so first things first, what maceration is and what it is not. So maceration is the process of oils blending together to harmonize to create a unified scent. So I think this kind of gets confused a little bit with the term aging, and that's totally understandable. However, maceration, is really specific to infusing two oils together. So we see a lot of, for example, ambroxan and vanilla infusions. So what an infusion is essentially combining two oils together over a long period of time, 6 to 12 weeks for oil concentrations to create that depth. And so what we're really looking for in this process is to ensure that these oils infuse and they have this depth that we're looking for. So maceration is without a doubt probably the most important process when it comes to perfume oils, because this is the only way that two oils can blend together seamlessly. There's no sort of heat flask process. There's no flash processing. So you really have to let the time it takes for two oils to fuse together. And it's usually a process of about 6 to 12 weeks versus your alcohol-based perfumes, which is usually 2 to 4 weeks. And the reason for that being is because we're looking for that maturity, okay? A perfume that is freshly off the press isn't necessarily emotionally mature yet. So in order for us to achieve that depth that we're looking for and that projection and longevity we want as a performance from a perfume, we really have to let it take the time it needs in order for it to fully coerce with the carrier oil, the other oils at play. And we want to create that 3 pyramid scheme. We want our top notes, our middle notes, and our bottom notes. So to ensure that that happens harmoniously, we have to ensure that it takes the time that it needs in order for those oils to blend together. So why maceration exists in perfumery is because we want two molecular structures to blend seamlessly. Okay, so when we're looking at an essential oil that sits by itself, it's a vanilla or it's a sandalwood or something or another, letting it sit by itself is a great way, to use in your oil diffuser, or use in a few drops in your facial cream that you may have. But when you're looking at perfumery, it's very important to ensure that whatever 2+ oils you're infusing together harmoniously take the time that it needs to fully macerate. And maceration, the process, it never stops. Okay, so once you have your two oils together and you let it sit for, I'd say, 6 weeks tops, then it's important to know that your perfumery, it does have an expiration date. So as in perfumers, we need to be cognizant of these expiration dates because over maceration exists. And it's essentially when your oil sort of spoils in a sense, and you're left with little depth. So the top notes essentially dissipate. You can't really smell like all those kind of fruity or lemony notes you may have at the top notes. And so, yes, it's extremely important for you to be cognizant of that and for your customers to be aware, I wouldn't use this product past 2 years. I'd say 2 years is pretty good. 1 year is optimal. And you want to ensure that your customers are replacing your products too. So essentially, once that maceration process is complete it's at its peak and it's at its prime. So as I mentioned before, there's a difference between volatile notes, so your kind of top notes that are usually quite sharp and they are very distinct from what is in your base. Your base notes are essentially rounding out in that first sort of maceration process. They're rounding out, they're getting more complex over time because they're infusing together. Let's say if you have 4, 5, 6, or 7 oils infusing together, that's going to make for a very complex fragrance. And so that's going to require a lot of maceration, I would say. Like if you can macerate within a 12-week period, that's probably optimal. It's usually not always ideal for a lot of markets because we are pushing out products to our consumers. But for an oil perfume, this is what is optimal. Okay, so this is why a lot of perfume oils are usually very rudimentary and they keep to maybe 2 or 3 because, again, the process of maceration is so slow. However, if we are looking for the depth that we want from this product, it's a vital and it's essential for us to ensure that these components and molecular structures are infusing together in a way that is allows the time for it to have that complexity and depth that we're looking for. In terms of what actually changes in your perfume over time during the process of maceration, is your sharp notes really soften because they have the background of your middle and base notes at foreplay. And so what happens is those kind of like sharp edges that you find in a yuzu, for example, or bergamot, those are kind of the sharpest notes in perfumery. They soften their edges a little bit. So when you first smell them, you're kind of left with a little bit more of a softer edge to that very sharp note. Mandarin is also a great example. A lot of perfumers love mandarin, but in some formulations they can be extremely sharp. And so that's where the process of maceration really helps out because you're getting more of that balance, you're getting more of that complexity and depth at play. And in terms of, the notes becoming more cohesive, that's another thing at play when we're talking about maceration. Okay, it's not just like we're looking at these top notes and they play them by themselves, and then the rest of it kind of we'll get to later portions of the day. They really do blend together. So you have this cohesive blend at the end of your process, and it tells a story. There's a sequential happening in your perfume. So like, let's say you're experimenting and you want to create a tripe. Floral tripes are extremely popular within the feminine world. So there's usually some sort of bergamot at the top, a rose, a jasmine, oak moss is then at the base, and patchouli. Those are the 5 really main components that make up a floral tripe. Okay, and so the bergamot and the rose and the jasmine play together, and then it has that complexity from the oak moss and the patchouli. So you get this really cohesive blend. And my best practice as a perfumer is to let 2 oils sit together, let those macerate, and then add the florals and then the top notes. So I'm not just going in there and putting everything at once. That's going to make for a very kind of dissipated formulation. You have to be really cognizant of your infusion method and let those oils really talk and dance with each other. And this is essentially how eternal formulation is created. If you want something that's going to last 8-12 hours in the day, this is what is really key. Like, I can't stress this enough. If you're looking for a formula that is going to perform and you don't need to reapply, this is really vital here because you get the projection and the longevity that you're looking for from this formula. And when you give it the time that it needs, it's going to really work for you in the long haul. The texture becomes smoother, the formula becomes creamier, you can smell the depth and the complexity in your fragrance. It lends for a way more interesting composition. And overall, the aura is just heavenly. Like, this is why my brand is called Sublime, is because I'm trying to emulate this very sublime kind of aura in my fragrances, and so that's really the goal. Okay, so maceration timelines. I think I mentioned before that the timeline is really critical when you are in the process of maceration, and usually the best practice for oil perfumes is 6 to 12 weeks. And so that is really due to the extrait formulation, because it is such a high oil concentration, 40%. I mean, that's probably the highest in the market. I think I've seen some 50% formulations, which, can be very strong and very much like stand out. So when it comes to looking at the timeline that's optimal, we want to make sure that our bases are maturing in a way that makes sense. So this is why the process takes so long. It's because of those bases. They're usually very resinous. They're very sticky. They're very complicated to work with. And so you need the patience. You need the time it takes in order to achieve that optimal level of maceration that you're looking for. You don't want to compromise on the depth here. You really want it to slow down, give it the time it needs. And then when it's ready and you can launch it in market, you have a beautiful product that is uncompromised. So essentially, when I'm creating my perfume oil formulations, I have to put on my my chemistry hat and really think about my environment. Okay, it's optimal to store your formulations in a cool, dry place because you don't want too many temperature swings. What the temperature swings are going to do is essentially compromise your formula. When high temperatures are introduced to these oils, essentially a lot of molecular structures get evaporated. All right, so you're not left with like a less kind of watered down version of whatever it is that you're trying to go for. Like if you're going for a jasmine and you want that kind of roundedness of a jasmine grandifolia, these kind of buttery and like heavy, heady florals. Muguets are also really heady, for example. It needs the time to macerate with your other oils in order to achieve that kind of creaminess, that powderiness that you're looking for. Another important note about creating a perfume oil is using glass. Glass is the optimal structure in which a perfume oil can macerate in, and it's because of that temperature control. Plastic is very easily manipulated in outer conditions, so it also is very easy to seep through. So chemicals such as polybutane can seep through into your formulation and compromise the scent. It compromises the way that a perfume smells. So we want to make sure that we are in a controlled environment, and glass is a great structure for doing that. So the key differentiator when it comes to macerating in oil versus alcohol perfume is the slower evolution in oil. Okay, so when it comes to oil perfumery, there's less evaporation that happens. There's more integration between oils, and so the true nature of a perfume is kept intact. And what I mean by that is when we're going in and we're essentially evaporating a perfume oil in an alcohol quickly, we tend to lose a lot of that initial depth that was introduced into a formula, right? So it's really important to say that we want to take the time that it needs in order for a perfume oil to slowly macerate and evolve. That evolution is so critical. We're really looking for something that is created over time rather than quickly and in an instance. That's not the goal. The goal of a perfume oil is really to create that quality, that quiet luxury that we're looking for. The slow maceration, it is a dream. Like, it is such a difference. I had a Sublime customer tell me once that a perfume oil is essentially when, like, it's a perfume that she's never, unlike anything she's ever had before. the freshness, the true like the trueness of it, the quality. She sort of compared it to coffee. And I initially was like, huh, okay, perfume as coffee. And it took me like some time to wrap my head around this. But yeah, essentially, like, would you rather purchase, a $2 coffee at Dunkin' Donuts that is instant and like dried? Or would you rather like go to a local coffee shop where they actually handpick their beans and they ground them and they, infuse them over time, in an espresso maker or, whatever kind of machine that they're using, versus like something, like I said, like that is fast produced. You really gotta take it as an art. Michelangelo didn't create the Sistine Chapel overnight. That was in and of itself a project that took many, many years and was commissioned by, the Pope. And so, like, I think of perfume the same way. Like, perfume to me is a kind of divine substance. Like, when I make a perfume, I can literally see the universe in a bottle. And it's mesmerizing. And so I think, like, in order for us to appreciate this art form, we have to take the time it needs in order for it to mature at a level and a complexity that it deserves. So in our culture too of instant promotion, and I see a lot of people, they purchase a perfume and they're super excited about it, and as they should be. And they take it out of the cellophane, they take it out of the package, and they spray it on their wrist or on their décolletage or their neck. And what this is a first impression of a perfume. Okay, so I would like to explain this. So essentially, the perfume that you have, it may be macerated. It may already be in that state of euphoric development. But oftentimes, what happens is when we're spraying a perfume initially that is hot off the press, it hasn't taken the time to fully develop and macerate yet. So first impressions are often fleeting, and they often aren't usually the correct assumption. So it's important to really be cognizant of this and let your product macerate, let it take the time it needs. I think for alcohol-based perfumes, it's usually 2 to 4 weeks, as I mentioned. So if you're finding that like, oh my God, like I don't like this is, smells like crap, whatever, let it sit for, give it a good 2 to 4 weeks, and then come back to it, revisit it, spray it on your wrist, spray it in your clothing, whatever. But just know that like first impressions are more often than not, like an incorrect assumption when you're first buying a perfume. So I think the reason why a lot of perfumes in the market have a tendency to smell very loud or flat is because of that heat flashing process. And with perfume oils, we have what is called slow resting. And so this is essentially where a perfumer like myself, when we create a perfume oil, we let the formula rest. And what's this doing is it's letting that infusion process take place. So I essentially, as much as, I look forward to the scent and I can't, I would like to know how something smells, I have to let the formula rest and I don't touch it. I literally let it sit in my little cabinet where it's a nice, cool, dark area. There's no kind of direct sunlight. There's no other sort of artificial light. And so that, like that, then the formula has its resting period. And there is such a thing as over maceration. So I think it's funny, like the Kayali Vanilla 28 is a great example of this. Like everyone was freaking out, like, oh my God, my perfume is turning purple. Like, please help, what do I do? Has it changed? And essentially, yes, like your perfume can over macerate, but the color isn't indicative of like any changes. So like you don't need to worry. I think color change is just a natural like process of any sort of formula. I noticed that there is so much variation within my formulations. It's nothing I can really control, nor would I want to. I don't really believe in adding extra dyes and like extra things to make a perfume look a certain way. I believe in the natural. So yeah, there's no reason to really fret about it. It's just something to be aware of, and like you're going to have a beautiful perfume no matter what. When it comes to perfume oils, there is something called micro batching versus, the mass production timelines that we're used to in the fragrance world. And it's important that we're cognizant of like this micro batch processing, because this is why like I'm not really able to move forward and like bring so many products at once and like be really, flashy and like as much as I would like to. My kind of business model and my process doesn't really call for it. So that's why I can get a really high quality product on the market, is because I allow it the time it needs in order for it to fully sync. And I'm also just not really into like this mass production, because I think a lot of it gets lost in the noise. If we're being really ambitious and we want like, oh my God, I want to release 20 fragrances this month. Like, okay, great. Does your product offer something to your consumer that is interesting and appealing? And is there like no kind of redundancy? Like, being redundant, I think, can have its own pitfall in the fragrance industry. And I do think that like there is a lot to be said about appreciating nuances. Absolutely. But I think when you're creating your own kind of perfume line, it's really important to be aware of what it is that your consumers want. So how I approach maceration is letting the formulation sit in a resting period for as long as it needs in order to cohesively develop. And I stand by this standard. I stand by this philosophy. I will always ensure that my products are top quality. I prefer quality over quantity. It's been a philosophy of mine that I've held very near and dear to my heart. And so I will always ensure that the extracts that I produce that are at 40% oil concentration will take that process and really own it. Customers should expect a high quality performing extrait de parfum from a perfume oil that has macerated in a 6 to 12 week period. And it is a smell that is uncompromised and will perform, I guarantee, 12 to 16 hours a day. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Follow me on all the things. I'm Lisa Hounds Rodon, and I'm looking forward to the next one.